Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It was one of those Saturdays where everything seemed to follow the usual routine. Liam woke up early, set up the charcoal, seasoned the meat, arranged the tables in the backyard, and organized the kids' toys. The smell of the grill began drifting through the neighborhood, bringing that familiar family weekend feeling. The kids ran around, and the first guests arrived with beer, laughter, and casual chatter. Rachel was inside, finishing getting dressed. When she showed up at the door, it took Liam a few seconds to recognize her. She was wearing a tight red dress, the same one she'd tucked away after a fight 3 years earlier, on their wedding anniversary. She usually didn't wear that kind of outfit for a simple at-home gathering. It was something she used to save for special occasions. But Rachel walked out like it was the most natural choice in the world. She didn't say anything to Liam. She just walked past him, grabbed a glass of wine, and joined the guests with her phone in hand, eyes locked on the screen. Liam watched in silence. He was busy with the grill, but something about the situation bothered him. Rachel had barely spoken to him. She'd avoided eye contact since early that morning and, even surrounded by family and friends, kept her distance. It was like she was somewhere else, just going through the motions. Every time a notification lit up her phone, she gave a half smile, bit her lip, sometimes even laughed to herself. Liam tried not to dwell on it, focusing on the meat, the kids, the conversations, until a car horn honked at the gate. Liam found it odd because all the guests had already arrived. He turned around and saw a dark car pulling up. Out stepped a tall, muscular man, looking way too confident for someone entering a place that wasn't his. He wore a tight shirt and sunglasses, even though the sun was already going down. Liam had never seen him before. The stranger walked right past him without even a greeting, opened the gate like he owned it, crossed the yard, and headed straight to Rachel. That's when everything changed. Rachel broke into a smile Liam hadn't seen in a long time, too big, too bright. She stood up, hugged the man, and introduced him with forced casualness as Marcus, an old friend who decided to drop by unexpectedly. Except it didn't look unexpected. It looked planned. Like she knew he was coming. Like she'd been waiting for it. Marcus greeted a few people, but with no real interest. He sat next to Rachel, and within minutes they were talking like old friends, sharing inside jokes, touching each other in ways that felt uncomfortably familiar. At one point, Marcus whispered something in her ear and she let out a loud laugh, throwing her head back as if she'd suddenly come alive again. Her laughter drew attention. Some relatives glanced at Liam, waiting for a reaction. But he just pretended he didn't see. His stomach was already twisting. The meat almost burned on the grill because he forgot to flip it. Later, while the kids were playing near the pool and the adults were more relaxed, Marcus got up without a word, grabbed a beer from the kitchen fridge, and came back wearing a mocking grin. He stopped in the middle of the yard, raised his glass, and, looking straight at Liam, said loudly, well, the man of the house has finally arrived." Silence followed immediately, as if time had stopped. Liam stood still, feeling the heat rush to his face. He looked at Rachel, hoping for some kind of reaction, some objection, a protest, an apology, anything. But she just let out a subdued laugh, like it was best to pretend it was just a joke. For Liam, it felt like a punch. A public blow. A humiliation in front of his kids, his friends, the entire family. He walked over to Rachel slowly, his voice low but firm. His eyes didn't blink, jaw clenched. He didn't shout or shove anyone, but the strength of his words felt like an alarm echoing through the cookout. "Do you want to explain what's going on here?" All eyes turned to them. The kids went silent. The grill still crackled in the background, but nobody seemed to notice. Rachel crossed her arms and rolled her eyes, as if the question itself annoyed her more than the situation. She spoke coldly, "Marcus is just a friend. He stopped by. You're the one making things up in your head." But even she knew that didn't cut it anymore. The look on Liam's face was no longer uncertainty, it was certainty. And once you're sure, everything changes. Rachel didn't seem rattled. After Liam's question in front of everyone, she just turned her back and kept talking to Marcus as though nothing had been said. That hurt more than any answer. Liam stood there, eyes fixed on the two of them, wondering at what point everything had fallen apart. People looked at each other, some started gathering their things, sensing the family atmosphere had turned into an uncomfortable standoff. An aunt said her goodbyes without much fuss. One of Rachel's cousins pretended to answer a phone call. Within minutes, the cookout was finished. Liam stayed until the end, helping the kids pick up toys scattered on the lawn. Rachel went inside with Marcus, and they stayed in the living room talking for a while. Then he left without giving anyone an explanation. Rachel came back to the living room, grabbed a glass of wine, and dropped onto the couch as if it were just another day. Liam came closer, stood in silence for a moment, and asked again, why was he here? Rachel, still staring at the TV, answered, I already told you. He stopped by. If you don't trust me, that's your problem. That line echoed in Liam's mind. That was when he stopped arguing. From that moment on, he started paying closer attention. He noticed every sudden trip out, every little laugh she let out at her phone, every message she hid by turning her body or switching it to airplane mode. She'd say she was going to the store but came back with a tiny bag and a new scent on her. She made up get-togethers with friends but wouldn't answer calls during these outings. Slowly, the details formed a clearer, harsher picture. A few days later, Rachel left saying she would spend the night at her sister's. Liam went into her room calmly, not even sure what he was looking for. Among clothes and boxes piled in the closet, he found an old, switched-off phone wrapped in a scarf she hadn't worn in months. It caught his eye. Unlocking it was easy, it was set to their wedding date, as if she hadn't even bothered to hide it. Liam's heart raced. The screen lit up with an avalanche of archived messages. Long conversations filled with emojis, promises, and inside jokes. Marcus sent photos of his day, shot videos in places Liam had never been. Some messages were dated at times Rachel had said she was sick, resting in the bedroom. Others showed Marcus already knew the kids' schedules, he knew when the house would be empty. There were also videos. Short clips, filmed from low angles. You could hear Rachel laughing in the background, sometimes whispering his name. Scenes recorded inside the house Liam shared with her. Inside their bedroom. The same room they had slept in for almost a decade. Liam's hand trembled. He put the phone on the bed and backed away, breathing so heavily it felt like his chest was tearing. The room spun. The walls felt like they were closing in. He tried to stay calm, but the shock was overwhelming. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. It was a direct insult. Seeing Marcus's face, the blatant closeness of someone who'd never feared getting caught, showed him this had been going on far longer than he'd imagined. He sat for a while with his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. The kids were asleep. The silence in the house clashed with the storm inside him. Liam thought about the birthdays when Rachel pretended she was too tired, about the trips she refused to take with the excuse of being swamped at work, about the pointless arguments she started just so she could leave earlier. Every memory now had a new color, a new smell, a new meaning. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was a slow breakdown of respect. A calculated destruction of the deepest bond he thought he had with someone. And all of it was going on under his roof, with his kids around, with his trust serving as the shield that kept this lie alive. Liam spent the rest of the night sitting on the edge of the bed, watching every video, reading every conversation. Not out of revenge. Not to punish himself. But because, at that moment, he needed to know everything. He needed to understand how far Rachel had gone and how much of their life had been real. The next morning, Rachel came home around 8, wearing the same clothes from the night before, her hair hastily pulled back, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Liam was already up, had made breakfast for the kids, set the table, and placed the divorce papers on the kitchen counter. Everything was arranged perfectly, as if the emotional chaos of the night before had brought some strange clarity. When Rachel walked in, he looked her in the eye. He didn't raise his voice, he just pulled out a chair and motioned for her to sit. Rachel hesitated, arms crossed, looking around as if searching for an excuse to dodge the conversation. But he didn't blink. He didn't look away. When she realized this wasn't a request, she sat down with a dismissive sigh. Liam slid the old phone across the table until it stopped in front of her. The unlocked screen showed her latest conversations with Marcus. Rachel stared at it for a few seconds, reading 1-2 messages. Then she let out a breath, like she'd been waiting for this. She leaned back in the chair and spoke coolly, "So that's it?" Liam stayed silent. Rachel picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. She opened a video folder and watched one of the recordings, letting out a nervous, almost sarcastic laugh. "You went through my stuff? You were spying on me? Seriously?" The accusation sounded empty. Compared to everything on that phone, spying was the least of the problems. Liam was quiet for a few moments. Then he spoke, voice low and steady. "I needed to know what was left of the truth between us." Rachel looked at him, and for the first time showed something close to honesty, a less defensive expression, like she knew the game was up. She set the phone down, folded her hands, and said, "This started in a way I can't even explain. At first, it was just conversation, an outlet. I was tired, exhausted, by the routine, the house, by myself. Marcus showed up when I felt invisible. He listened to me. He made me laugh. And before I realized it, I wanted more." Liam kept his eyes on her. Hearing that felt like someone peeling away every bit of his dignity. Still, he kept listening. He wanted to understand, even if it hurt like a knife twisting in his chest. Rachel went on, "We met up a few times. You were traveling. The kids were with your parents. The house was empty and I felt free. With him, I wasn't just a mom, just a wife, just a housekeeper. I was someone again. Desired. Seen by name and getting attention. And yes, I know what I did. I know how serious it is. But as strange as it might sound, what scared me wasn't cheating on you. It was the idea of continuing to live the same way, day after day, without feeling anything." She ran a hand through her hair, then rubbed her face as if she wanted to hide from her own words. Liam still said nothing. Until she said something that shattered everything. "I even thought about introducing Marcus to our kids. I thought about what it would be like if he lived here, in this house. If he were by my side every day. If you just stopped being here." That made Liam tremble. Not out of fear, but anger, an indignation that came from deep inside him. He'd devoted years of his life to someone who'd casually considered erasing his presence from his own family story. He stood up slowly, took the documents from the counter, and placed them firmly on the table. "Everything's here. Divorce, custody, support, splitting assets. I've already talked to my lawyer. The boys stay with me. You can visit when you want, but this is over. There's no going back." Rachel grabbed the papers dismissively, glanced at them, then tossed them back on the table. "You're really going to throw everything away like this?" Liam looked at her with an expression that was both sad and relieved. "You're the one who threw it away. I'm just sweeping up the pieces." Rachel stood up slowly, went to the bedroom, and soon came out with a small suitcase. She didn't say goodbye to the kids, didn't ask where she was going. She just walked out with firm steps, refusing to show regret. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like the end of a chapter. Liam stayed in the kitchen for several minutes. The silence now was complete, but no longer suffocating. It was the kind of silence that comes before rebuilding. He washed the breakfast dishes, picked up the dirty plates, and organized the toys scattered across the living room. The kids, not fully grasping what had happened, asked about their mom. He just said she needed some time away and that from this day forward, everything would be different, but better. Even with his heart in pieces, something inside him began to change. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was back in his own body. He felt the weight of the truth, but also the relief of not living in a lie anymore. It took Liam weeks to reorganize his life. Between meetings with his lawyer, adjusting to his kids' routines, and trying to silence the thoughts that came back night after night, he found a strength he never knew he had. The house felt bigger. Every corner held a memory, but over time, those memories stopped hurting and started marking all he'd overcome. He clung to a promise he made to himself the day Rachel walked out with that suitcase: he would be the kind of father his kids would be proud of. He was there for every homework assignment, made them breakfast, helped them study, went to parent-teacher meetings, showed up at school events. More than that, he talked to them. He sat down at the table and listened. He wanted them to grow up knowing real love doesn't require you to earn it, that respect comes before desire, and that being present is worth more than any gift. Over the following months, Liam not only rebuilt his routine but also the way he saw himself. For years, he believed he was the problem. He constantly wondered if he hadn't done enough, if he'd stopped noticing, praising, touching, loving. But with some distance now, it was clearer. He'd always been there, faithful, supportive, a father, a partner. What happened was Rachel's choice, not proof of his faults. She tried to reconnect one ordinary afternoon, the kind where all days seem the same after a storm. She rang the doorbell and waited outside for a long time before he opened the door. Rachel looked different: shorter hair, slumped shoulders, a tired expression. She said she wanted to talk. Liam answered calmly that he would listen, out of respect for their shared past and their kids. They sat facing each other, no hugs or forced smiles. Rachel took a deep breath and began. She said Marcus had disappeared from her life shortly after the divorce was finalized. That he'd promised her a future, but vanished at the first sign of difficulty. That she found herself alone, with no home, no stability, without the kids, and only then realized what she had lost. She admitted she was wrong. That she was really wrong. That she traded a solid life for an empty impulse. She apologized and cried. Said she wanted to try again, that she was willing to start over. Liam listened to everything, every word, every regret. But his expression remained calm. There was no anger, no desire for revenge, only a solid sense of certainty. When she finished, he got up and walked over to a shelf where a few pictures of the kids were displayed. He picked one up, a shot of the three of them at a park, smiling like they were completely free, and brought it to her. That guy you left behind, he's gone. I went through a living kind of grief. I buried expectations, dreams, plans. And after all that, I was reborn. The man who exists now is someone new. A complete father. A more aware human being. And he doesn't fit in the life you're offering anymore. Rachel stayed quiet. Tears fell, but she didn't beg. She seemed to understand that was a door that would never open again. She stood, thanked him for listening, and left silently. As she walked through the gate, she looked back for the first time. She saw Liam playing with the kids in the yard, laughing with a lightness she no longer knew how to find. That sight hurt more than any words. A few weeks later, the boys came home from school saying their mom had shown up there. She brought presents, hugged them both, apologized for everything. They asked if they could see her more often. Liam said yes, as long as she stayed honest with them. He also said a mother's love needs to be shown with presence, responsibility, and truth. That's the only way it matters. He knew that sooner or later, the kids would piece together what really happened. that they'd grow up and figure it out on their own. But until then, he would do everything in his power to protect them, guide them, and show them, day in and day out, that integrity is a person's greatest asset. Looking back on what he'd been through, Liam understood that, as painful as the betrayal was, it was also a turning point. A brutal ending, yes, but also the start of a whole new version of himself. The story Rachel tried to erase only grew stronger. The absence she created made room for a solid presence to take shape. And Liam, even though he was hurt, chose to keep going, whole. Because true love isn't lost when someone walks away, it proves itself in a fresh start. And in this new beginning, he discovered the greatest truth in life: the love that really builds you up comes from daily choices, sacrifice, and character. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can replace that. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.